the next step in kind of measuring systems and setting up yourself for figuring out how to translate these objects onto the surface. So I started with this tabletop surface itself, and I've done a couple checks measuring with that tool, intuitive perspective, that technique where you have your arm extended and you close one eye. For me, it's always my right eye intuitively. And I don't know if that's because I'm using my right hand and that's just what my brain tells me to do or what, but you'll find out what comes naturally to you. So I'm just resting, resting a long drawing tool on the angle and then checking it to make sure that that's the line that I've drawn has a similar sort of direction and angle. So the idea of the perceptual grid is all about kind of mapping your drawing based on what you see to this surface. So if I just take a look, I can see like roughly I've got my objects are pretty much within kind of this space of the tabletop. And every object has sort of a height versus width kind of space that it takes up from the highest point of it to the lowest, and then from the widest point to the other side of the width. So like for example with this bottle, we're going to measure from the very bottom where it sits to the top. And not worry so much about this information here, the negative space of the object, but just think about like if I had to put a box on top of that, if I had to design a box or build a box that would fit custom on top of that bottle, how big would it be? And then that will give me some clues about how much space it's going to take up in my drawing. And I can kind of measure that dimension in that box and divide it so that when I have a symmetrical object, I can make sure that the object is kind of taking up the right amount of space. So this will make a lot more sense as we develop along. So again, I'm going to go back to my viewfinder. Always start with a viewfinder. I drew these lines to guide myself on where the tabletop is based on the bottom of my viewfinder being on this point right here from this posture, my drawing posture that I'm standing. So when I have my viewfinder out, it actually for me cuts off the top of the bottle just slightly, okay? And then I have a little bit of space on each side where there's no object, but the top of the bottle is going to come all the way up to there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think about how big that box is and how much space it takes up inside my viewfinder. Okay, because remember, the window dimension of the viewfinder and the edge of your picture, your paper, are the same proportionally. So we've got an 18 inches wide picture and a 6 inches wide window. That's divided by, 18 divided by 3 is 6. 24 divided by 3 is 8, right? That's the correct math. Everybody who told you that there wasn't math in science and art, they were wrong. So if you hate math, you're going to have to learn to live with it and figure it out. We're also going to have to use a ruler in this class, which sometimes students are surprised by. Okay, so I'm looking through my viewfinder and I'm seeing that about a third of the picture is taken up, from here to here, maybe a little, or 2/3 of the picture rather. About a third of the picture is below the bottle, and then the bottle takes up about this much space. Just looking through the viewfinder. And I can tell that by using this measuring device and it actually works best if you use a pencil, so I'm going to grab my pencil here. So standing in my same drawing posture, again, using my viewfinder. I'm measuring the space between the bottom of the bottle and the corner of the table or the corner of my viewfinder. And it's about, the space there is about 1/3 of the whole height of the window. So if I kind of take if I translate that to this, because 1/3 of this obviously is smaller than 1/3 of that. But again, since we're using proportions, we can just kind of gauge it up or scale it up. So about a third of the picture is going to be about here. So I'm going to make a mark there. And then I'm going to look through my viewfinder and see where does the middle of the viewfinder go. kind of like what, if I had a line drawn down the center of this window, and I have a line drawn at the center of my page, what objects does that hit? And what I'm seeing is that the bottle dimension is actually resting kind of just about half, maybe a little less than half there. So I'm going to make a mark there, and since I know that looking through my viewfinder, the bottle goes right off the top of the page, I'm going to assume that my bottle is taking up the size of that, like sort of the custom box for that bottle would be about this height, around about. So we're just getting kind of estimations right now. We can tighten them up later. Then I'm going to move on to the next largest thing. It's a good idea to start with the largest thing. The next largest thing for me is that picture that's sort of in the background or the distant ground. Okay? And for me, when I look through my viewfinder, the picture takes up the space in this kind of portion of the viewfinder, and thus that sort of portion of the drawing itself. Because if I think about the center of my page here, which is also my eye level, or I'm treating it like my eye level here, if I draw a line or sort of hold a line across my viewfinder, I've got the sort of bottom of that pot is resting there. Okay? So I know that my picture is going to fit sort of in here. And they touch in my viewfinder, only just slightly. The kind of belly of the picture, the widest part of the picture, touches the box, the side of that bottle. And then there's a full entire overlap of the orange, not an entire overlap, but a bit of an overlap of the orange. So the orange in my picture is right around the center line. If I had to build a custom box for it, it would be about that big. So now I know sort of around about where things are, okay? And I'm going to continue to measure and develop. Before I draw any lines, before there's anything specific about this picture at all, before you have any idea what is going to go inside these boxes, you need to figure out how big they are, okay? And you need to figure out where they are in relationship to each other. So earlier we did the intuitive perspective thing to figure out the angles of the tabletop. And I can just check mine again. Again, I'm just resting the tool on that edge. And then just, again, since I'm standing, I can just shift and pivot that measurement and check and gauge whether or not, and this might be just slightly off. I'm going to take a step back and just look and make sure that everything makes sense. I think this box for the orange might be slightly small, so I'm going to take another look. And I think it may be a little too close to this guy. So I'm just going to look and move it, make it maybe just a little bit bigger. And then I have my chamois so I can wipe this out. Remember we talked about the chamois? It's kind of an eraser, but it's not an eraser. All these lines that we're starting to make are part of developing what's called the perceptual grid. You can make relationships. You know, if I extend these lines out here, 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 and then I check perceptually, because drawing is about perception, where they hit the other object, those are all reference points to tell me whether or not I have accuracy in my perception. Okay. It's also about relationship, because you can't know what's happening with this bottle if you don't understand where the surface that it's sitting on is. And you can't really know how big this orange is unless you make comparison to the jug. So as you build the drawing, you never want to develop anything carefully. And a lot of times in our previous drawing experience, what we've done is we've gotten real good at drawing a certain type of thing. For me, when I was in high school and like I was taking AP art classes, it was the face. I was super interested in the face. I drew 200 portraits in 1 year as part of my like senior exhibition in high school. And I just got obsessed with that. So I could draw a real good face. But the thing is, I didn't understand the body. Well, what good is the face if we don't understand the body, if we're interested in the figure? It's not super helpful. So the same thing is going on here. You know, it doesn't matter to me what the character of that orange is, you know, the texture, the surface, the shape, if the size is all wrong and it doesn't work for the rest of the picture. So you're going to be used to sort of developing something that you like or you feel like you're good at or you have experience with and overdeveloping it. And then you're going to have to go back and correct that and kind of lose that information because you you don't understand what's going on with the rest of it, right? So these are the going slowly, developing, moving from the very, very general, which this doesn't look like a whole lot now, but it's the structure for a good drawing and an accurate drawing. And that's what we want. We want to be able to look at anything in the world, analyze it, figure out what its relationship to its surroundings and context are, and then translate that information in a way that makes sense for whatever the goal of the picture is. So thanks. That's a little bit more about perceptual grid, and I'll see you in a short time here.